Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Hi all, I'm Asanka Wijesinghe. I work at the Institute of Policy Studies as a research economist. We co-authored this paper. The co-author is Chathurrdhika Yogarajah. Our research topic is Sri Lanka-Bangladesh Free Trade Agreement, and we try to find an initial framework for free trade negotiations, and we further analyze the effect of existing trade policy on South Asia global value participation. We witness increased trade policy activism in this pandemic period. Some countries imposed export restrictions, and some other countries followed import policy reforms. Further, countries started to talk about inward-looking and reshoring economic activities. We talked about globalization like that. However, trade is recovering fast. You can see this is a new data set using the port calls data. The green line is the world trade, total trade and exports and imports. It is recovering, and in Sri Lanka also trade is pretty much recovering. So there is little evidence for this deglobalization talks. And we think that fast economic recovery depends on integration to the global value chains. In this background, we looked at a potential free trade agreement between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. I think the talks started back in 2017, but with the previous, most recent visit by the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka to Bangladesh, this interest was a bit renewed for a free trade agreement. About 2 or 3 days ago, the cabinet of Sri Lanka also nodded to continue the negotiations for a free trade agreement. Sri Lanka and Bangladesh has a considerable trade relationship and also bilateral and multilateral partnerships in organizations. Still, the trade is not huge compared to the both countries' overall trade performance. It is still less than 200 million US dollars. If you look at this bilateral trade intensity, you can see that Bangladesh is emerging as an important trade partner for Sri Lanka. Bangladesh and Sri Lanka both have some export similarity in common markets like European Union and United States. Maybe this is due to the emphasis in textiles in both countries' export basket. So in this study, we ask what are the products that need to be focused in trade negotiations between two countries, and what are the gains from bilateral tariff elimination for both countries. And further, we asked what is the effect of current trade policy on trade integration of South Asia. In this case, we went beyond the conventional trade gross exports as the dependent variable. We use the decomposed global value chain components. To answer these questions, we produce offensive lists for both countries and conduct partial equilibrium analysis. Finally, we estimate a theoretically consistent gravity model. Offensive list is a priority list of products both countries can use in trade negotiations. They can ask concessions for those products from each country. A product is included to offensive list if the product is imported by the partner country, and if that product is produced by the reporter with the capacity for expansion, and the reporter must have a comparative advantage. As an example, Sri Lanka should have a comparative advantage in that product. And also the partner must already have a tariff on this product, unless it is useless to talk because we have the preferential access system. We use comparative advantage index to calculate for the third purpose, and we use 10 million threshold to filter the products. These products were used in the partial equilibrium analysis. We used the smart of widths. This is a flexible model with we can estimate this model with fewer data requirement. So that's an advantage actually. But there is some problem that these elasticities, it is hard to find product specific elasticities. So our estimates are contingent upon these elasticities. In the final step, we estimated theoretically consistent gravity model using pseudo-Poisson maximum likelihood estimator with country, year, and dyadic country pair fixed effects. We used these fixed effects to identify the effect of trade policy. Trade policy was captured by the RTA dummy and the applied tariff, both simple and weighted tariff. This is the gravity equation. We estimated two sets of gravity equations. One thing is for general GVC component of gross exports. The second equation, in this case, the third equation is direct components of GVC. I will explain them briefly in the next slide. These are the dependent variables. For the second equation, we use the direct domestic value addition. That means we can capture or proxy the gross exports. As an example, if Sri Lanka exports a good to Bangladesh, this component is the component consumed by Bangladesh within the country. It is not only in for the global value chains. The other component is indirect domestic value added. This is the component used by Bangladesh to process and for re-exporting. So this captures our forward linkage of GVC participation. The third component is foreign value added. That means of the product Sri Lanka exports to Bangladesh, what is the component that represent the foreign value added, foreign inputs in that commodity. So for the third equation, we use direct GVC measures. One thing is domestic value returned home. That means we export something to Bangladesh and Bangladesh process it and re-export it back to Sri Lanka. And direct foreign value added, that means the global, our backward participation with Bangladesh directly. Export values are from trade map and WITS data sources, and also we downloaded tariff data from WITS. GVC global value chain decomposition data from Asian Development Bank's multi-regional input-output data set. This is the offensive list results. We identified 39 products as Bangladesh offensive list at HS 6 digits. And actually this, the actual trade value is really low because currently both countries do not have much stronger trade relationships. Among these 39 goods, 21 are intermediate goods, 18 are consumption goods. As an example, frozen fish, potatoes, and turmeric, they are important consumption goods in the list. So after the simulation, we found that Bangladesh can increase its exports to Sri Lanka by 32 to 50% based on the Armington elasticity, substitution elasticity value. The lower bound is about 32% for this offensive list. In Sri Lanka's case, we identified 115 products at HS 6 digits. Sri Lanka will also gain about 37 to 67 more exports to Bangladesh in this case. Important thing is here also 75 goods are intermediate goods. So these results show that intermediate goods dominate the offensive list. So in the trade negotiations, both countries have a greater opportunity to increase their global value participation, global value chain participation through free trade agreement. However, the question is that we already have a lot of trade agreements. Some are regional. We don't have bilateral trade agreement with Bangladesh. So what is the lesson we have learned from this existing regional and other bilateral trade agreements? Was there a positive effect? So we use these GVC components and estimated this theoretically consistent gravity model to find out the effect of existing trade policy. This third table shows, in this case, the independent variable of tariff rate is a simple mean, simple applied mean, not the weighted average of tariff. In table 4.
Dear presenter, you have 2 minutes left.
Sure, thank you. In table 4, it is weighted mean. You can see that RTA effect is mostly non-trivial. If it is, mostly trivial. If it is non-trivial, it is mostly negative for all the sectoral exports like agriculture, food, textiles, and total exports. We found the same result when we looked at the direct components of GVC. RTA effect is either insignificant or negative significant. So we found that the effect of RTAs is mostly trivial or non-trivial but negative. One reason for this may be most RTAs in our region come with complex rules of origin and sensitivities. There are a lot of strings attached to these trade deals. So any positive effect of RTAs can be partially or totally offset by non-tariff issues such as these general regulatory policies, as an example, rules of origin. But we found this negative significant effect of tariff, currently existing tariff. So we believe that no conditions attached tariff cuts would be more effective in future trade deals. So our policy recommendation is that one thing is current trade agreements needs to be restructured. And for Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, if they are going ahead for a free trade agreement, they would have to be really careful about these conditions attached to the trade agreements. In case of the offensive lists, both countries can act defensive on those lists. As an example, Sri Lanka might be defensive on agricultural products and rubber products. Sri Lanka is following pretty tight import restriction regime right now. As an example, turmeric was in Bangladesh offensive list, but Sri Lanka has totally banned turmeric imports right now for domestic self-sufficiency rationale. So these are our findings. We thank you for this opportunity to present our work here. Questions and comments are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asanka. I mean,